where Mike started, but zoom out even further, because Mike mentioned austerity. Austerity is a tool, right? It's the forces of capitalism that have created an economy that is based on maximum extraction of our labor and endless grabbing of our public resources, be they physical resources, the environment, or the resources that we always consider the public good. And so austerity is a tool to reduce debt by reduced public spending. And 2001 is an important number that I'm going to mention, but this has been going on for about 40 years, right? So I want to tell you my personal story quickly just to illustrate where we were and how much we've declined since then. I grew up in Pittsfield. My father was a teacher. He, on a teacher salary, put 3 kids through Berkshire Community College, and then we each went to state school. I went to Framingham State. And we came out debt-free. And that was in the 80s, the early 80s, and it was my generation, which was the last generation to come out of public higher ed debt-free, because austerity began kicking in right about then. And so Lisa is one of my co-conspirators in the Fund Our Future campaign, and I'm here to talk about the companion part of the campaign to the pre-K 12 funding bill. We're now in a fight for funding for public higher education. In 2014, there was another study that was commissioned, and it was a higher ed study, and it showed that this was commissioned in 2014, but it didn't have the same teeth that the foundation budget actually has under the law. So what that study showed is since 2001, Massachusetts has been underfunding public education by $580 million a year. And so there have been subsequent studies done. Mass Budget, who Mike referred to, also put out a study called Educated and Encumbered. It talks about rising student debt. And then UMass Boston faculty and staff commissioned they did their own study, and they came up with a report called Crumbling Foundations, and that illustrates how privatization and underfunding have led to the budget crisis and skyrocketing debt at UMass Boston. So what's the result of underfunding? The state is underfunding Massachusetts colleges. There's 29 colleges between 15 community colleges, and then the state university system, and then the UMass system. Student debt has skyrocketed, and as a result of underfunding, the trend has become an adjunctification of the faculty and staff. So too many full-time faculty are now replaced with adjuncts whose labor is exploited. They don't have health care, they don't have office hours or an office, so they can't provide the education that our students deserve, because there's no place to meet with them after class to counsel them, plus they have to get off the campus site and drive 100 miles to their next job to piece together a living. And some of them are on food stamps or eat from the food pantries on the college campuses. And the stories that we've heard throughout this campaign are similar to students. Students in public higher education are coming out with $30,000 debt, and they have to make choices. Are they gonna pay their tuition and fees or eat? Are they gonna pay their tuition and fees or pay their rent? They have to work multiple jobs, which means also it's taking them more than 4 years to finish an education. And this is public college, and who do our public institutions serve the most? Predominantly are students of color who just got out of the pre-K 12 system, who never had a fully funded pre-K 12 education. So this is the story of austerity that starts at birth and goes all the way through higher ed. So the Cherish Act is the bill that we put forward. We intentionally named it the Cherish Act from the line in the Constitution that you heard Lisa read. It is the duty of all magistrates to cherish education. And while the Supreme Court case that was ruled for pre-K-12 ruled that the state has a constitutional obligation to fund public education, there was no lawsuit against the state for their constitutional obligation to fund higher education. And that's what the Cherish Act is about. The Cherish Act will implement the core findings of this 2014 Higher Ed Commission study, resulting in more than $500 million, we calculate about $580 million in additional funds for public higher education. It'll establish in a statute a fair and adequate minimum funding level for public higher education at no less than the fiscal year 2001 rates. So there's that 2001. Again, we are just asking to go back to 2001 levels. That is wholly inadequate, but that's where we have to start, right? So a moral budget has to get us there, and then it has to take us into the future. And the 29 college presidents have agreed that if the state releases the money, they will freeze tuition and fees. So that freezing tuition and fees over 5 years as the Cherish Act is phased in, as long as the legislature appropriates the funds required to reach the 2001 per pupil funding levels. It used to be the state funded per pupil spending at $12,000 in 2001 per pupil. It's down to $8,000. So students are carrying, skyrocketing debt. The Cherish Act will be a step to begin to reduce debt. We've been talking internally inside of MTA and the Race of Massachusetts of this idea that the next phase has to be a debt-free campaign. But the real campaign has to be like a free. Public higher ed should be free in the same way that pre-K-12 is free. And that's what the moral budget has to be. So I just want to close by saying really critical next Thursday, as Lisa was saying, for people to show up in the State House, because the pre-K-12 funding bill is really good in terms of money, but it's dangerous in terms of accountability. It comes with stringent reporting that a district has to report how they're going to use evidence-based curriculum as part of their plan, right? So we are attaching all kinds of amendments that say that money cannot actually be withheld for any reason, and those district plans have to be opened up so we can get out of the box, so that they're bringing in resources that will reduce class size, that will bring in counselors instead of cops, right? That will have school nurses and restore our librarians and bring back the arts program.
Yes.
So we actually need you to show up October 3rd, and if you can't show up on October 3rd, we will get, through Jonathan and Cole, the message to you about what the numbers of our amendments are, and we need to put serious pressure on the Senate to accept our amendments. And I just learned when I was on the phone out in the hall, a Bakerite, of course, attached an amendment saying that the money is tied to student performance. If you want your money, right? It's the carrot and the stick. So we need you to do two things. Advocate for the $1.5 billion and the amendments that the Fund Our Future campaign is calling for, and push hard against the Baker amendments. So we'll get you that information. So thank you.